Jack Turner was 39 years old, though most mornings his body felt closer to 60. He lived alone in a narrow apartment above a closed bait shop on the Ohio River, the kind of place with thin walls and a refrigerator that hummed all night like it was trying to remember something. Jack worked the night shift at a federally contracted truck impound yard just outside town. Long rows of semis, sodium lights, paperwork. Silence. It was a job chosen carefully. No teamwork, no small talk, no surprises. A place where nothing asked him how he was doing. He was a former Marine, but that wasn't something he told people. Not anymore. Around here, that word came with handshakes, questions, and well-meaning looks that lingered too long. Jack didn't want gratitude. He didn't want pity. He wanted the days to pass quietly, like water sliding past a riverbank without leaving a mark. He had no family left in town, no friends he called. No plans beyond making rent and keeping his health insurance active through the contractor's bare-bones benefits package. For Jack, survival had become practical, almost administrative. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. The less he wanted, the less it could be taken from him. That night, the rain had been coming down hard for hours. Cold, relentless, the kind that soaked through denim in minutes. The Ohio River had swelled past its usual calm, dark and muscular, pressing against the concrete banks with a low, angry sound. When his supervisor waved him off early because of the storm, Jack didn't argue. He clocked out, pulled his jacket tight, and started walking instead of driving. Walking helped. Movement kept the noise in his head from getting too loud. He followed the river path, beneath the old steel bridge, boots slipping slightly on wet gravel. The bridge groaned overhead as a freight train passed, metal on metal, the vibration traveling down into his bones. Jack welcomed it. Loud things drowned out memories better than silence ever could. He was halfway under the bridge when his phone buzzed in his pocket. A missed call from a number he didn't recognize. Probably another reminder about car insurance rates or extended warranties. He ignored it and kept walking, breath steady, eyes on the ground. That was when he heard it. At first, Jack thought it was the wind twisting through the bridge supports. Then he stopped. The sound came again. Thin, broken, wrong, not mechanical, not human. A strained, rasping whine that rose and fell like someone fighting for air. His body reacted before his mind caught up. Jack froze. Every muscle tightening the way it used to overseas, heart rate spiking, breathing shallow. He hated this feeling, the sudden alertness, the way the world narrowed. But he didn't move away. He turned instead, scanning the shadows along the riverbank. The sound came again, closer now. Jesus, he muttered under his breath. He stepped off the paved path and slid down the muddy embankment, grabbing at brush to steady himself. The rain stung his face. The river surged just yards away, swollen and fast, carrying debris downstream. Under the yellow glow of a flickering streetlight, something moved near the waterline. Jack squinted. At first, it looked like a dark shape caught in the current. Then the shape lifted its head. A dog. Time 1200. No, 2. His stomach dropped. In the water, nearly submerged, was a large German shepherd. Her body strained against the current, neck stretched upward, muzzle barely breaking the surface as the river pushed against her. Around her neck was a rope, pulled tight, disappearing beneath the churning brown water. And on the concrete ledge above her, slick with rain, a small puppy trembled violently, paws skidding as it cried out in sharp, panicked bursts. Jack took a step forward, rain soaking through his boots. "What the hell?" he whispered. The dog in the water didn't thrash. She didn't bark. She just looked at him. Her eyes were steady, clear, resigned. And in that look, Jack saw something he recognized far too well. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, the puppy's footing slipped, and its cry cut through the storm. "Hey!" Jack shouted, breaking into a run. And then the river answered. The puppy's back legs slid out from under it, claws scraping uselessly against the slick concrete. Its cry sharpened into something raw and desperate, a sound too small to survive a place like this. Jack lunged forward, boots skidding, arms outstretched as the puppy teetered on the edge. "Easy! Easy!" he called, his voice hoarse, like it hadn't been used properly in years. The puppy froze for half a second, wide eyes locking on him, chest heaving. That second was enough. The mother dog reacted instantly, with a sudden surge of strength that didn't seem possible for a body half drowned and bound. She thrust her head upward, water breaking around her muzzle. A low, forceful huff tore from her chest. Not a bark, but a warning. "Stay back." The puppy stopped. Jack caught himself on one knee, rain soaking through his pants. He turned his attention back to the dog in the water, and that's when he saw the rope clearly. It wasn't frayed. It wasn't improvised. It was thick, high-grade rope, the kind used for load-bearing work. The knot at her neck sat flat and clean, cinched tight with deliberate precision. Jack's jaw clenched. Dogs didn't tie knots like that. Accidents didn't look this neat. "This was done to you," he said quietly, more statement than question. The dog held his gaze. The river shoved against her body, forcing her lower. Her nose dipped under for a split second before she dragged it back up, gasping. The effort cost her. Jack could see it in the côte, tremor running through her shoulders, the way her head bobbed despite her will. He moved closer to the edge, lowering himself flat against the concrete. Cold water splashed over his hands as he reached for the rope. The shock shot straight up his arms. "Hang on," he muttered. "I've got you." He wrapped both hands around the rope and pulled. Nothing. The line didn't give an inch. Whatever was anchoring it beneath the surface was heavy, fixed, intentional. Jack braced his boots and pulled harder. muscles screaming as he leaned back with his full weight. The rope burned into his palms, slick with rain and river slime. "Come on," he growled. Still nothing. Behind him, the puppy let out another thin cry. Jack glanced back just long enough to see it shivering uncontrollably, ribs showing beneath soaked fur, eyes darting between him and its mother. Every instinct in him screamed to grab the pup first. Get it to safety. That's what you do, but the mother's eyes flicked toward the puppy, then back to Jack. Not fear. Command. Jack felt something crack open in his chest. He knew that look. He'd seen it before. In men pinned down, wounded, holding the line so others could move. It was the look of someone who had already accepted their own end, as long as the mission finished. "No," Jack whispered, shaking his head. "That's not how this goes." The river surged again. Time for Hanstrom, higher this time, slapping against the ledge. The puppy stumbled, claws skidding dangerously close to the edge. Jack shifted his weight, stretching one arm back toward it, while keeping the rope clenched tight with the other. "Hey," he said softly, forcing calm into his voice. "Hey, kid. Stay right there." The puppy crouched, torn between terror and instinct. Then the current slammed into the mother dog's side. She yelped, a sharp, involuntary sound, and her head disappeared beneath the water. "Damn it!" Jack shouted. He hauled on the rope with everything he had, dragging her muzzle back above the surface just long enough for her to gasp. Water poured from her mouth. She was fading. Jack could see it now. The rhythm of her struggle was slowing, her movements less controlled. The puppy panicked. With a shrill scream, it launched itself forward. "No, wait!" Jack yelled. Too late. The puppy's paws lost traction, and its small body slid off the ledge into the rushing river. The current seized it instantly, spinning it sideways, pulling it away from the bank. The puppy thrashed, head bobbing above the surface for a second, then gone. Jack's heart slammed into his throat. He had a split second to choose. If he let go of the rope to dive for the puppy, the weight beneath the water would drag the mother down for good. If he held on, the river would take the pup. He froze, and then the mother chose for him. With a violent final surge, she lunged, not toward the bank, but toward her drowning child. The rope snapped tight, cutting into her neck, but she ignored it. Her jaws closed gently around the scruff of the puppy's neck as it swept past her. Using everything she had left, she lifted her head and flung the puppy upward, shoving it toward the concrete ledge. The puppy landed hard, coughing, scrambling away from the edge. The force of the motion dragged the mother down. Her body sank. The rope went taut. The river closed over her head. Jack screamed her name, though he didn't know it, and threw his weight backward, refusing to let go. Not again. Not this time. The rain roared louder, the river pulling like it meant to win, and Jack Turner held on, even as his hands began to bleed. Jack's boots slid another inch toward the edge. Mud gave way beneath his heels, slick and unforgiving, and for a heartbeat, he felt the river try to claim him too. The rope vibrated in his hands, humming with tension, cutting deeper into his palms until his fingers went numb. He leaned back, teeth clenched, shoulders burning, refusing to loosen his grip. The dog was still underwater. He could see the rope slicing straight down into the churning brown current, disappearing into darkness. Whatever held her was solid. Rebar, concrete, something heavy and final. This hadn't been panic. This hadn't been careless. Someone had stood here, tied that knot, tested it, and walked away. "Who does this?" Jack snarled into the rain. The answer came uninvited, cold and immediate. People do. The puppy lay several feet behind him now, coughing violently, small body convulsing as it spat river water onto the concrete. It was alive. Barely. Jack registered that fact with distant relief, like a note scribbled in the margin of a much darker page. He didn't turn around again. He couldn't afford to. The water churned, and then, slowly, agonizingly, the mother's head broke the surface. She gasped. It was a terrible sound. Wet. Broken. More reflex than breath. Her amber eyes rolled wildly for a second before locking onto Jack's face. Rain plastered her ears flat against her skull. Water streamed from her muzzle. She wasn't fighting the rope anymore. She was done fighting the river. She just watched him. And in that look, Jack felt the ground fall out from under him. There was no panic there. No plea for herself. What he saw instead was focus. Razor sharp, calm in the middle of chaos. The kind of calm that only came when fear had already been spent. He had seen that look before. On a roadside outside Fallujah. On a corporal pinned behind a burning vehicle, bleeding out, waving the rest of the unit forward. "Go. I've got you covered." Jack's throat tightened. "You don't get to decide that," he said hoarsely, as if she could understand every word. "Not tonight." Her eyes flicked past him, just for a moment, toward the puppy, then back to Jack. The message hit him hard enough to stagger him. "Take him." "Let me go?" "No," Jack whispered, shaking his head violently. Rain mixed with something hot on his cheeks. "I don't do that anymore." The river surged again, higher this time, slamming into the ledge and washing over Jack's forearms. The rope jerked hard, yanking him forward. His muscles screamed in protest. He was losing leverage, losing time. The mother dog's head dipped under again. "Hey, hey!" Jack shouted, hauling back with everything he had left. "Stay with me!" Her nose broke the surface for a second, then sank. Bubbles rose. Dark, frantic, then fewer. The rope bit deeper into Jack's hands. Skin split. Blood ran, warm against the cold rain. His grip slipped, just a fraction. In that instant, the past came rushing back with brutal clarity. Another river, another night, another hand slipping from his grasp. "Not again," Jack growled, planting his knees into the mud, anchoring himself. "Not this time." Behind him, the puppy whimpered, a thin, broken sound that cut through everything. Jack heard it, but he didn't turn. He couldn't. If he did, he knew exactly what would happen. The river didn't care about vows or ghosts. The mother dog surfaced again, slower now. Her movements were uncoordinated, her strength nearly gone. She wasn't trying to swim anymore. She was being pulled, inch by inch, by the weight around her neck. Their eyes met one last time. She stopped struggling completely. Jack felt it through the rope. The sudden dead weight. The moment she surrendered. Something inside him snapped. "No," he said fiercely, voice cracking. "You listen to me. You don't quit. You hear me?" The rain hammered down, drowning out his words. The river pulled harder, relentless. The rope vibrated like a live wire, threatening to tear free from his ruined hands. Jack dug in deeper, teeth bared, breath coming in ragged bursts. He wasn't strong enough. He knew that. One man against a flooded river and a buried anchor wasn't a fair fight. But fairness had never saved anyone. As his arms began to shake uncontrollably, Jack heard footsteps behind him. Heavy, deliberate, close. A flashlight beam cut through the rain, dancing wildly across the water before locking onto the rope in his hands. The puppy on the ground. The submerged shape beneath the surface. A gruff voice broke through the storm. "Son," it said sharply, "if you let go now, she's dead." Jack didn't look back. "If I let go," he shouted, "she's already dead." There was a brief pause. Then the voice came again, closer now, calmer than it had any right to be. "Then don't let go," the man said. "I've got a knife." Jack felt a presence drop beside him, solid and sure, kneeling in the mud without hesitation. And for the first time since the river had tried to take everything from him, Jack realized he wasn't holding the line alone anymore. The man dropped to his knees beside Jack without hesitation, rain soaking through his jacket as if it didn't matter. He was older, late 60s maybe, with a thick gray beard plastered to his face and hands that looked like they'd spent a lifetime gripping ladders and hoses. A retired firefighter, Jack guessed instantly. You didn't forget that kind of stance. Solid. Grounded. "I'm Frank," the man said, already working. "Don't talk. Don't move." Jack didn't answer. He couldn't. Every ounce of his strength was locked into the rope, slicing through his hands. His forearms shook violently now, muscles threatening to give out. The river surged again, colder, angrier, slamming into the concrete ledge with a sound like a freight train. Somewhere behind him, the puppy let out a weak, rattling whine. Frank leaned over the edge, peering into the brown chaos below. "She's down deep," he muttered. "Anchor's heavy." "I know," Jack rasped. "It's tied on purpose." Frank's jaw tightened. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. He pulled a heavy rescue knife from his belt, the blade catching the yellow streetlight. "I'm going in," he said simply. Jack's head snapped toward him. "You'll get swept." Frank cut him off with a look. "You hold that line like your life depends on it," he said. "Because right now, hers does." Before Jack could argue, Frank kicked off his boots, clipped the knife to his wrist, and slipped into the water. Time 200 mems. The cold stole his breath instantly. Jack heard it. The sharp gasp, the involuntary grunt, as Frank disappeared beneath the surface. The rope jerked violently as the current fought the added weight. Jack leaned back, teeth clenched, boots digging trenches into the mud. "Come on," he growled through gritted teeth. "Come on." Seconds stretched impossibly long. 5, 10. The mother dog's head broke the surface again. Just barely. Her eyes were glassy now, unfocused. Her body hung limp beneath the water, suspended by the rope biting into her neck. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was past that. Jack felt panic claw up his throat. "This is it," a voice whispered inside his head. "This is how it ends. You hold on, and they still die." He shook his head hard, rain flying. "No," he said aloud, to the river, to the memory, to himself. "Not today." The rope trembled. Then it went impossibly tight. Jack was yanked forward, nearly losing his balance as something below pulled hard against the current. Frank. He had found the anchor. Jack could feel it now. Tiny vibrations traveling up the line as Frank worked underwater, sawing at the knot or the rebar or whatever hellish thing held her there. His arms burned. His grip slipped again, blood making the rope slick. Behind him, the puppy crawled closer, pressing its small, shaking body against Jack's thigh as if trying to help. The warmth of it, fragile, alive, hit him like a punch to the chest. "Stay with me," Jack whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. The mother dog's head dipped under again. "Frank!" Jack shouted into the rain. "Now!" The seconds stretched. Too long. Just as Jack felt his strength finally begin to fail, the tension vanished. The rope snapped free so suddenly, Jack fell backward onto the concrete, gasping. The loose end whipped through the air and slapped the ground beside him. For half a second, everything went eerily quiet beneath the roar of the storm. Then the water exploded. Frank surfaced with a violent splash, coughing hard, one arm wrapped around the limp body of the dog. "Pull!" he choked out. "Pull us in!" Jack scrambled forward, ignoring the pain screaming from his hands and shoulders. He grabbed Frank's jacket with one hand, the dog's thick scruff with the other, and hauled with everything he had left. Mud, water, and muscle collided as the three of them slid onto the slick embankment in a tangled heap. Frank rolled onto his back, hacking up river water. Jack barely noticed. He was already crawling toward the dog. She lay on her side, motionless. Rain plastered, her fur flat against her ribs. Her chest didn't rise. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, staring at nothing. "No," Jack breathed, hands shaking as he pressed them against her ribs. "No, no, no." He leaned down, ear to her chest. Nothing. The puppy whimpered weakly and nosed its way toward her, bumping her muzzle, confused and desperate. Jack's vision blurred. For a moment, just one, he let himself believe it was over, that despite everything, he had still been too late. Then he felt it, a faint flutter beneath his palm, so weak it was almost imaginary. "There," he said sharply, looking up at Frank. "She's still here." Frank dragged himself upright, eyes bloodshot but alert. "Then we move," he said without hesitation. "Now. Nearest emergency vet's 10 minutes if the roads aren't flooded." Jack nodded, already lifting the dog's heavy body into his arms. She felt colder than she should have. Too still. The puppy pressed itself against her belly, trembling. As Frank staggered toward his old pickup truck, Jack followed. Rain and river water streaming from him, heart hammering. Behind them, the Ohio River surged on, indifferent. Ahead of them, somewhere in the storm, there was still a chance. What do you think keeps someone holding on in moments like this? 1. Duty. Love. 3. Guilt. Type 1, 2, or 3 in the comments. Your answer matters. The pickup roared to life like it had been waiting for this moment. Frank slammed the driver's door shut and threw the truck into gear, tires spinning briefly in the mud before catching. Rain hammered the windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. The headlights carved 2 narrow tunnels through the darkness, illuminating flooded streets and debris dragged loose by the storm. In the open truck bed, Jack sat with his back pressed against the cab, cradling the K9 dog against his chest. She was heavy, dead weight heavy, and terrifyingly cold. Her fur soaked through his jacket almost instantly, the chill sinking straight into his bones. He didn't care. He pulled her closer, unzipping his coat and wrapping it around her broad chest, pressing her against his core like a lifeline. The puppy wedged itself between them, a small, shivering knot of warmth and fear. "Stay with me," Jack murmured, rocking slightly as the truck fishtailed over standing water. "You didn't come this far to quit now." The dog didn't respond. Her head lolled against his arm. Her breathing, if it was breathing, came in faint, uneven rattles that sounded more like water than air. Jack checked her pulse again, fingers trembling as he searched along her inner thigh. There. Still there. Weak. Thready. Like a signal about to drop. "Frank!" he shouted over the wind. "She's got a pulse, barely." "That's all we need," Frank yelled back, voice raw but steady. 10 minutes, maybe less if God's feeling generous. The words should have comforted Jack. They didn't. The vibration of the truck, the howl of the storm, the weight in his arms. His mind betrayed him. The present blurred at the edges, replaced by another night, another ride that had felt just as fast and just as slow all at once. A helicopter, rotor blades chopping the air, red lights flashing. A body bleeding out on a stretcher while Jack held pressure and whispered the same useless words. "Stay with me. Stay with me." His chest tightened. His breath hitched. "Not again," he whispered fiercely. "I'm not losing another one." The puppy let out a low, continuous whine, pressing its face into Jack's chest as if sensing the shift in him. Its heart hammered beneath his hand, frantic and fast. Jack focused on that instead. The living, panicked rhythm. "Easy," he murmured, forcing his own breathing to slow. "Breathe with me." He inhaled deep through his nose, exhaled slow through his mouth. Again. The puppy's trembling eased just a little. The dog in his arms shuddered. Jack froze. Her chest rose. Barely. Time 800 mums, but unmistakably. A shallow, desperate breath clawed its way out of her lungs, followed by a weak cough that brought up a trickle of river water. "That's it," Jack said urgently, hope punching through the fog. "That's it. Keep fighting." The truck swerved hard, tires screeching, then straightened. Ahead, through the rain, a glowing sign emerged like a lighthouse. 24-hour emergency veterinary care. Frank laid on the horn as they tore into the gravel lot. The truck skidded to a stop. Frank was out before the engine died, yanking the tailgate down. "I've got the pup," he said, scooping the trembling puppy into his arms without ceremony. "You take Mom." Jack nodded, lifting the dog with a grunt as his abused muscles processed. She was heavier now, or maybe he was just weaker. The clinic doors flew open. "Help!" Frank bellowed. "Drowning! Hypothermia! K9 unit!" A woman in blue scrubs appeared instantly, eyes sharp, movements efficient. "Trauma room, now!" she snapped. "Get her on the table." They moved as one. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and warm electricity. Bright lights replaced the storm's darkness, harsh and unforgiving. Jack laid the dog gently on the stainless steel table, hands lingering a fraction of a second too long, time 300 times before stepping back. She aspirated water. The veterinarian, Dr. Emily Ross, her badge read, said briskly, already working. "Severe hypothermia, neck trauma." "She was tied underwater," Jack said, voice rough. "Someone tried to drown her." Dr. Ross's jaw tightened. "We'll talk later." Machines beeped to life. Tubes slid into place. Warm IV fluids flowed. A tech wrapped the puppy in a heated blanket, murmuring softly as it continued to whine. Jack backed up against the wall, suddenly aware of how violently he was shaking. Mud, blood, and river water streaked his clothes. His hands throbbed with every heartbeat. The monitor above the table flickered. Then it flattened. A long, piercing tone filled the room. "Cardiac arrest," Dr. Ross said sharply. "Starting compressions." Jack's knees buckled. He slid down the wall, staring as hands pressed rhythmically against the dog's chest. Once, twice, again. The puppy let out a sharp, broken bark. "Clear," Dr. Ross commanded. The paddles discharged with a dull thump. Nothing. Jack bowed his head, fists clenched, breath coming in ragged pulls. He'd seen this ending too many times. "Again," Dr. Ross snapped. The puppy barked again, louder this time. The monitor flickered. A blip, then another. "Hold," the vet said. Beep, beep. A rhythm returned, weak but real. Jack sucked in a shaky breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and pressed his forehead against the cool wall. She was still alive. For now. The beeping didn't stop. It slowed, steadied, then slowed again. Uneven, fragile. But there. Jack stood on the other side of the glass, hands pressed flat against the cold pane, watching the rise and fall of the K9's chest, as if his will alone could keep it moving. The trauma room buzzed with controlled urgency, murmured commands, rubber soles squeaking on tile, the low hiss of oxygen. Dr. Emily Ross moved with practiced efficiency, but Jack caught the flicker in her eyes every time the monitor dipped. She wasn't relaxed. She was buying time. Frank stood beside Jack, silent now, arms crossed, rainwater still dripping from his beard onto the linoleum. He didn't offer comfort. He offered presence. Sometimes that mattered more. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time had stopped obeying normal rules. The puppy lay wrapped in a heated blanket on a nearby counter, watched over by a vet tech. Its breathing had evened out, but its eyes never left the glass. Every time the mother's heart rate stuttered, the puppy whimpered softly, as if it knew. Jack swallowed hard. "Is she going to make it?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. Dr. Ross glanced up briefly. "She's alive," she said. "That's all anyone can promise right now." Jack nodded. He accepted that kind of truth better than false hope. A nurse approached him with gauze and antiseptic. "Sir, your hands—" "I'm fine," Jack said automatically. She gave him a look that said she'd heard that lie before. "Sit," she ordered. He did. As she cleaned the rope burns, the sting dragged him back into himself, back into his body, away from the glass and the ghosts. Blood seeped through the gauze again almost immediately. "Occupational hazard?" she asked lightly. "Something like that," Jack replied. When she finished, she hesitated. "You can stay," she said quietly. "But you should know. She's chipped." Jack's stomach dropped. "Chipped," he repeated. "Yes, she's a K9, police dog. Retired from what I can tell. That makes things complicated." Complicated. Jack leaned back in the chair, the word echoing hollowly. He had known, hadn't he? From the rope. The discipline. The way she'd held the line even as the river tried to kill her. "She was trained," he said, "and someone decided she was disposable." The nurse didn't argue. Dr. Ross joined them a moment later, peeling off her gloves. "I ran the chip," she said. "Ownership traces back to the department. A handler will be notified." Jack felt a cold pressure settle behind his eyes. "And if that handler is the one who did this?" Dr. Ross held his gaze. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens." That wasn't an answer. It was a pause. The door to the trauma room cracked open. A tech wheeled the table. Time 400 mems. Closer to the glass, allowing the puppy to see its mother more clearly. The little dog squirmed out of the blanket and pressed its nose to the barrier, tail twitching weakly. The mother stirred. Just a fraction. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a moment, Jack thought she might slip away again. But then her chest rose, slow and deliberate. The monitor steadied. Jack exhaled shakily. In that breath, something inside him shifted. For years, he had existed in survival mode, day to day, hour to hour, keeping the volume low so the memories couldn't find him. No attachments, no promises, no losses that would hurt too much when they inevitably came. But standing there, watching a dog fight her way back from the edge because her puppy needed her, because someone had finally chosen not to let go. Jack realized something terrifying. He cared, and caring meant vulnerability. Frank broke the silence. "You saved her life," he said simply. Jack shook his head. "No," he replied. "I just didn't walk away." Frank studied him for a long moment. "Sometimes that's the same thing." The clinic doors chimed softly as someone else entered. Jack didn't look up at first. He was too focused on the fragile rhythm behind the glass. Then he felt it. The shift in the room. The subtle tightening of air. Dr. Ross straightened. "That'll be the handler," she said under her breath. Jack turned. A man in a dark jacket stood near the front desk, rain barely touching him, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. He looked clean, official, in control. The puppy growled, low, instinctive, angry. Jack stepped forward without thinking, placing himself between the glass and the newcomer. Whatever came next, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't stepping aside. The man by the front desk didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Officer Ryan Blake carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that came from years of being obeyed. His jacket was dry. His boots were clean. He looked like someone who had arrived late to an inconvenience, not to the aftermath of a near-death rescue in a flooded river. Dr. Ross met him halfway. "Officer Blake?" "Yes," he said, flashing a badge that caught the fluorescent light. "I'm here for my dog." The word landed wrong. Jack felt it immediately. The way the puppy stiffened, the way the mother's heart rate spiked on the monitor behind the glass. The puppy let out a sharp, guttural growl that had no business coming from a body that small. Blake glanced down, unimpressed. "That one too," he added. "Didn't know she had a litter." Jack stepped fully into his line of sight now. "She almost died tonight," Jack said evenly. "Both of them did." Blake's eyes flicked to him, assessing, taking inventory. "And who are you?" "Someone who pulled her out of the river," Jack replied. Blake nodded once, dismissive. "Appreciate it. I'll take it from here." He moved toward the glass. Jack didn't move out of the way. Dr. Ross cleared her throat. "Officer, she's medically unstable. I've placed a 48-hour hold." Blake exhaled slowly, irritation creeping into his expression. "Doctor, with respect, she's department property. She was retired due to performance issues. I'm authorized to retrieve her." At the word property, the mother dog flinched so violently her IV line rattled. Her body curled inward, tail tucked tight, eyes wide and glassy with fear. A dark stain spread beneath her on the blanket. She had lost control. The room went quiet. Jack's jaw tightened. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "She doesn't recognize you," he said. Blake scoffed. "She's traumatized. Dogs get confused." "She's terrified," Jack corrected. "There's a difference." Blake's gaze hardened. "You're crossing a line." Jack met his stare without blinking. So did whoever tied a load-bearing rope around her neck and dropped her into a rising river. The air went cold. Dr. Ross's eyes flicked sharply between the two men. "Officer," she said carefully, "how exactly did your K-9 end up in the Ohio River during a flood warning?" Blake's jaw worked. "She was stolen," he said quickly. 3 nights ago. Must have been dumped." Jack felt a familiar heat bloom in his chest. He recognized it now. Not rage, not fear. Clarity. "Funny," Jack said, "because that knot wasn't a panic job. It was clean. Time, 1,000 shims. Professional. The kind someone ties without thinking." Blake's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. "You sound awfully confident for a civilian." "I'm a Marine," Jack said. "We notice details." Blake stepped closer, invading his space. "Then you should know when to stand down." The puppy barked, sharp and angry, and lunged forward, placing itself between Jack and Blake, teeth bared, body shaking but defiant. Dr. Ross raised a hand. "That's enough. Officer Blake, you will not remove these animals tonight. If you try, I will call internal affairs and animal control." Blake stared at her for a long moment, then adjusted his jacket. 48 hours, he said flatly. "That's all you're buying him." His eyes slid back to Jack. Cold. Calculating. "And when I come back," Blake added, "I expect you to be gone." He turned and walked out, the door chiming cheerfully behind him. No one spoke for several seconds. Jack released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from resolve. Frank placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. "He's bad news." Jack nodded. "He's not done." Dr. Ross crossed her arms. "Neither are you," she said. "If you're going to fight this, you'll need proof, not instincts, not courage. Evidence." Jack looked through the glass at the K-9, still trembling, still alive. Her eyes found his, and slowly, carefully, she stilled. He leaned closer to the glass. "I won't walk away," he whispered. "I promise." And for the first time since the river, she didn't look like she was bracing for death. She looked like she was waiting. The clinic grew quieter after Blake left, but the silence didn't bring relief. It pressed down instead. Thick, watchful, like something waiting to spring. Jack sat alone in a vinyl chair across from the glass, elbows on his knees, fingers laced together to keep them from shaking. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving behind a deep, hollow ache. Across the room, the K-9 lay sedated but breathing, her chest rising and falling beneath the blanket. The puppy slept curled against her side, finally still. Dr. Ross joined him, holding a tablet. "I pulled her full file," she said. "It took a while." Jack looked up. "And?" She hesitated. That was never a good sign. "Her name was Luna," Dr. Ross said quietly. "K-9 unit. 8 years on the force. Narcotics and tracking. Multiple commendations." Jack nodded slowly. None of that surprised him. "She was injured during a high-risk warrant 18 months ago," the vet continued. "Crushed vertebrae, shoulder damage, cleared medically, but she never went back to full duty." Jack felt something tighten in his chest. They benched her. They retired her, Dr. Ross corrected. Early, handler retention was optional. Jack leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Optional, he repeated. Dr. Ross scrolled. Her handler at the time of retirement was Officer Ryan Blake. Of course it was. After retirement, Dr. Ross went on, ownership transferred to the handler. That's department policy. Luna disappeared from vet records 6 months later. Jack frowned. Disappeared how? No follow-ups, no checkups, no wellness visits. For a working dog with known injuries, that's unusual. She lowered the tablet. And then tonight happens. Jack's jaw clenched. He said she was stolen. Dr. Ross met his eyes. People say a lot of things when paperwork doesn't line up. A tech approached quietly. She's stable, she said. Still critical, but stable. Jack released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you. As the tech walked away, Dr. Ross lowered her voice. I've placed the 48-hour hold, but Blake is right about one thing. Legally, he has a claim. If he comes back with paperwork and a calm story, it'll be hard to stop him. Jack stared at Luna through the glass. Sedated, vulnerable, still flinching in her sleep as if the river hadn't let her go. What about the rope? He asked. The knot, the river. That proves abuse, Dr. Ross said, but not who did it. Jack nodded. He had known that was coming. Frank appeared then, carrying 2 cups of burnt clinic coffee. He handed one to Jack. You look like hell, he said. Time to 200 thumbs. Jack snorted softly. Feel worse. Frank glanced toward the trauma room. She gonna make it? I think so, Jack said. If she's allowed to. Frank's mouth tightened. And the cop? Comes back in 2 days, Jack replied, with a smile and a badge. Frank took a slow sip of coffee. Then you'd better be ready. Jack stared at the dark surface of his cup. Ready. The word echoed with old meaning, loadouts, briefings, contingency plans. He hadn't been ready for anything in years. He'd built his life to avoid it. I don't even know where to start, Jack admitted. Frank set the cup down. You start where the truth hides. Paper trails, old places, people who stopped asking questions. Jack looked up. You'd help me? Frank shrugged. I don't like bullies. Never have. He paused. And I don't like seeing good dogs thrown away. Jack swallowed. The weight of the next 48 hours settled over him, heavy but clarifying. Dr. Ross leaned in. If you're serious, she said, I can connect you with a pro bono legal aid clinic in Columbus. Animal cruelty cases, high conflict ownership disputes. Jack blinked. You'd do that? She gave a thin smile. I didn't go into veterinary medicine to hand victims back to their abusers. Jack nodded, gratitude tightening his throat. Across the glass, Luna stirred. Her eyes opened just a slit, unfocused but searching. Jack stood and stepped closer. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand and rested it against the barrier. Her gaze found his. For a moment, neither moved. Then he exhaled, a long, quiet breath, and her body relaxed just a fraction. Jack closed his eyes. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, we'll do this." Outside, the storm finally began to ease. The river would recede. The evidence would dry. And somewhere between paperwork, memory, and truth, the next fight was already forming. This one wouldn't be against water. It would be against a system that preferred clean stories to messy justice. And Jack Turner was done walking away. Morning crept into the clinic like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Gray light filtered through the high windows, dull and hesitant, settling over the waiting room where Jack had spent the night without really sleeping. He sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, staring at a crack in the tile floor as if it might offer answers. His phone buzzed once. Frank, letting him know he'd stepped out to make a few calls. Jack nodded to no one and went back to waiting. Behind the glass, Luna breathed. That alone felt like a victory. Dr. Ross came in just after 7, coffee in hand, hair pulled back tighter than before. "She made it through the night," she said quietly. Jack looked up. "No crashes?" "None," she replied. "Still critical, still sedated, but she's stable." Jack closed his eyes and let that sink in. Stable meant time. Time meant options. The clinic door chimed. Jack's shoulders tensed before he even turned around. Officer Ryan Blake walked in like he owned the place. No uniform this time. Civilian clothes. Clean jeans, pressed jacket, polished boots. He carried a manila folder under one arm and wore a practiced expression of calm patience, the look of someone who expected to be obeyed. "Morning," Blake said pleasantly, as if they were neighbors running into each other at a hardware store. Jack stood. Dr. Ross stepped forward immediately. "Officer Blake, visiting hours haven't started." Blake smiled. "I'm not visiting. I'm here to retrieve my animals." He opened the folder and slid a stack of papers across the counter. Ownership transfer. Medical clearance from retirement. Department release forms. He tapped the top page. All in order. Jack didn't look at the paperwork. He watched Luna instead. The moment Blake's voice filled the room, Luna's body reacted. Her breathing spiked. Her paws twitched against the blanket. Even sedated, her body recognized the threat. The puppy, awake now and wrapped in a towel near the tech station, began to growl, low, continuous. Blake glanced over, annoyed. "That thing needs training." "That thing just watched its mother drown," Jack said evenly, "by someone who knew how to tie a perfect knot." Blake's smile thinned. "You don't know what you're talking about." Dr. Ross picked up the folder, scanning it. "The medical hold is still active," she said. 48 hours. Blake leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Doctor, you and I both know holds can be overridden, especially when insurance liability and departmental assets are involved. Jack felt heat rise in his chest. Time to 200 brum. Assets, he repeated. That's what she is to you? Blake turned to him, eyes cool. You're out of your depth, Marine. This is a legal matter now, not a rescue story. Jack stepped forward, closing the distance until they were eye to eye. Funny thing about legal matters, he said quietly. They tend to fall apart when the truth shows up. Blake scoffed. Truth? He gestured toward Luna. She was aggressive, unreliable. She failed a controlled scenario. The department cut her loose, that's it. Jack didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She saved your life, he said. The room went still. Blake's jaw tightened for just a fraction of a second. Enough. Dr. Ross looked up sharply. What did you say? Jack held Blake's gaze. There was an incident. Warehouse raid. She pulled you out when a beam collapsed. You filed it as non-critical intervention to protect your record. Blake laughed, but it was sharp and forced. You've been watching too many cop shows. Frank chose that moment to walk back in. He didn't say a word. He simply set his phone on the counter and tapped the screen. Video footage played. Grainy body cam. A K-9 lunging forward. A man being dragged clear just as the structure behind him collapsed in a cloud of dust and noise. Time Salmon. The timestamp blinked in the corner. Blake's face drained of color. That video was sealed, Blake snapped. Frank shrugged. Funny thing about cloud backups. Dr. Ross stared at the screen, then at Blake. You retired her after that? She became a liability, Blake said, voice rising. And now she's sick, injured, worthless. The word hung in the air. Luna whimpered softly behind the glass. Jack's voice dropped to a near whisper. You didn't just abandon her, he said. You tried to erase her. Blake slammed his hand on the counter. You don't get to judge me. Dr. Ross straightened. I get to protect my patients. And as of this moment, I'm extending the medical hold pending an animal cruelty investigation. Blake's eyes burned into Jack. This isn't over. Jack nodded once. No, he said. It's just started. Blake turned and walked out, the door chiming behind him like a lie. Jack exhaled slowly. He wasn't a Marine standing in a river anymore. He was a witness, and witnesses changed outside. By noon, the clinic felt smaller, not physically, emotionally, like the walls had inched closer, squeezing every conversation into a whisper. Jack stood at the window with a paper cup of bad coffee cooling in his hands, watching the last of the storm clouds peel away from the Ohio sky. The river would drop soon. Evidence would wash clean. Time, like always, would take the side of whoever moved faster. Dr. Ross joined him, folding her arms. I've filed the report, she said. Animal cruelty, potential misconduct, internal review. Jack nodded. How long before it matters? She didn't sugarcoat it. Days, weeks, if we're lucky. Blake will be back with counsel before then. Jack looked through the glass at Luna. Awake now, groggy. Her eyes tracked movement, alert despite the IV line and bandage around her neck. When Jack shifted, she noticed. Her tail thumped once against the blanket. Tentative, unsure, but real. "She trusts you," Dr. Ross said quietly. Jack exhaled. "That might not be enough." "No," she agreed. "It rarely is." Frank cleared his throat from behind them. He had his phone out, screen glowing with a list of names. "I made some calls," and he said. "Retired K-9 trainers, old union guys, a journalist who owes me a favor, and a legal aid clinic in Columbus that handles high-conflict custody and animal welfare cases." Jack turned. "They'll take it?" "They'll listen," Frank replied. "That's the first fight." Jack felt the familiar itch between his shoulders, the old readiness returning, unwelcome but useful. "What about the department?" Frank snorted. "Departments protect themselves. People don't." The clinic door chimed again. This time it was a woman in a sensible coat with a leather satchel and tired eyes. She introduced herself as Mara Klein, attorney with a nonprofit specializing in animal cruelty and wrongful seizure cases. Pro bono, limited time, sharp questions. They met in a small consultation room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and copier toner. "Here's the problem," Mara said after listening. "Ownership transferred to the handler. That gives Blake a presumptive right. Your counter is abuse, abandonment, and immediate danger." Jack leaned forward. "He tried to kill her." Mara nodded. "Then we prove intent." "How?" "Paper, pattern, opportunity." She ticked them off. Rope purchase, prior complaints, gaps in veterinary care, and behavior, hers especially. Courts listen when an animal's response corroborates harm. Jack swallowed. She freezes when she hears his voice. Time, chapter 200 moose. "That matters," Mara said. "A lot." Dr. Ross slid a folder across the table. Medical findings, rope burns, aspiration, hypothermia, timing consistent with the flood surge. Mara scanned it, impressed. "Good documentation." Frank added, "I've got a lead on a sporting goods store near Blake's route home. High-grade rope. Receipt retention." Mara looked up. "That's gold." Jack felt the clock ticking louder now, each second a hammer. "He'll come back tomorrow." Mara met his eyes. "Then tonight we build a case that can survive daylight." They split the work without ceremony. Frank would chase receipts and cameras. Mara would file an emergency injunction to extend the hold. Dr. Ross would prep a behavioral affidavit. Jack would do the one thing he hadn't done in years: go back into the city and ask questions. As they stood to leave, Mara paused. "One more thing," she said. "If this goes to hearing, Blake's counsel will come hard. They'll question your credibility." Jack didn't flinch. "I know. They'll bring up your service record, PTSD, stability." Jack nodded. "I know." Mara studied him for a long moment. "You don't have to be perfect," she said. "You just have to be honest." Jack left the clinic as evening settled in, the air smelling of wet pavement and cut grass. He stood by his truck, hands resting on the door, and looked back through the glass one last time. Luna lifted her head. Their eyes met. "I'm coming back," he said softly. "I won't be late." The clock didn't care about mercy, but Jack Turner did. Night came clean and cold, the kind that sharpened sound and made every light feel like an interrogation lamp. Jack parked 2 blocks down from a strip of shuttered storefronts near the riverfront, engine ticking as it cooled. He sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel, breathing slow, letting the old instincts settle into something useful instead of loud. Frank's text buzzed in. "Found the store. Cameras keep 30 days. Managers closing up." Jack stepped out into the dark. Summit Ridge Outfitters was still lit inside, fluorescent glare over racks of climbing gear and river hardware. The bell chimed when Jack entered, and a man in his 50s looked up from counting a drawer. The manager had the posture of someone who'd spent a life lifting boxes and fixing what customers broke. "Closing," the man said. "I'll be quick," Jack replied. He placed his hands on the counter, palms open. "I'm looking for a purchase made during the flood warning. Load-bearing rope, professional grade." The manager studied him. "You a cop?" "No," Jack said, "but I'm working with legal aid on an animal cruelty case." That did it. The manager's expression shifted. Not soft, not hard. Curious. "I remember the storm," he said. "Everybody remembers the storm." Jack nodded. "So do the cameras." The manager hesitated, then glanced at the clock. 5 minutes. They watched the footage together in a cramped back room that smelled like cardboard and dust. Timestamps rolled by. Customers flickered past. Umbrellas, wet jackets, hurried faces. Then a familiar silhouette appeared. Officer Ryan Blake. Civilian clothes. Same jacket. Same watch. He moved with purpose, pointing at the rope wall, speaking to a clerk. The clerk handed him a coil. Thick, dark, unmistakable. Blake nodded, paid cash, and left. The timestamp glowed, 7:42 p.m. Jack felt his pulse slow. This was it. "Can you print the receipt?" Jack asked. The manager frowned. "Cash sale. No name." "Cameras don't forget faces," Jack said. The manager nodded once. "I'll export the clip. You'll need it subpoenaed." "I've got a lawyer," Jack replied. Frank's truck rolled up outside as Jack stepped back into the night. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He just felt the weight in his chest shift, from helpless to heavy with responsibility. "Got it?" Frank asked. Jack held up the flash drive. "We got him buying the rope." Frank let out a low whistle. "That's not just intent. That's planning." They drove across town to the last place Frank had mentioned. The old K-9 training grounds, long since repurposed and forgotten. The gate hung crooked. The lights were out. But the perimeter cameras still worked, their red dots blinking like patient witnesses. They didn't break in. They didn't have to. The trash bins sat at the curb for morning pickup. Frank lifted a lid. "You sure about this?" Positive, Jack said. Inside, training cones, shredded targets, empty energy drink cans. And at the bottom, wrapped in a grocery bag, a short length of rope. Same weave, same color. Ends melted sloppy, rushed. Jack photographed everything, gloved hands steady. He bagged the rope, sealed it, labeled it. Chain of custody mattered. He knew that now. A neighbor's porch light clicked on. A woman leaned out, wary. "What are you doing?" "Documenting," Jack said calmly. "For an investigation." She looked at the rope, then at Jack's eyes. "That dog," she said. "The one he used to have. She screamed sometimes." Jack's breath caught. "When?" "After training," the woman replied. "And after storms." Jack nodded. "Would you say that to a judge?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." By the time they returned to the clinic, the sky was paling. Dr. Ross met them with tired eyes and a thin smile. "She ate," she said. "A little. Sat up on her own." Jack exhaled. "Thank you." Mara arrived minutes later, hair pulled back, legal pads under her arm. Jack handed her the flash drive, the photos, the bagged rope, the witness contact. Mara didn't waste words. "This buys us an injunction," she said, "and leverage." Behind the glass, Luna stood unsteadily, braced by the tech. When Jack approached, she took one careful step toward him, then another. No flinch. No fear. "Good girl," he whispered. Not as a command, but a truth. Mara watched the exchange. "Behavioral corroboration," she said quietly. "Judges understand that." The clock still ticked, but now it ticked for both sides. The hearing room was smaller than Jack expected. No flags, no dramatic benches, just beige walls, a scuffed table, and a judge's desk that had seen better decades. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper. It was a place built for procedure, not justice. But Jack had learned long ago that the truth didn't need grand stages. It needed space to stand. Judge Eleanor Price entered without ceremony, glasses low on her nose, eyes sharp and tired in the way of someone who had heard every excuse imaginable. "Let's proceed," she said, already reading. Officer Ryan Blake sat across the room beside his attorney, a man in an expensive suit with a voice practiced to sound reasonable. Blake didn't look at Jack. He stared straight ahead, jaw set, hands folded neatly, as if discipline alone could carry him through. Mara Klein rose first, calm, direct. "Your Honor, we're requesting an emergency injunction to prevent removal of a retired K9 and her puppy from veterinary care, pending an investigation into aggravated animal cruelty." Blake's attorney stood smoothly. "This is a misunderstanding fueled by emotion. My client lawfully owns the animal. The dog was stolen and tragically abused by unknown parties. Mr. Turner's assumptions, while dramatic, are not evidence." Judge Price looked up. "We'll see," she said. Ms. Klein? Mara nodded and called Dr. Ross. The vet testified plainly. Rope burns consistent with load-bearing knots. Water aspiration timing aligned with flood surge. Behavioral trauma triggered by the handler's presence. In my professional opinion, Dr. Ross said, returning this dog to Mr. Blake would pose an immediate risk to her safety. Blake's attorney objected. Speculation. Medical judgment, the judge replied. Overruled. Mara called Frank next. He spoke the way he did everything. Without polish, without drama. He described the rescue, the knife, the anchor, the rope, the timing. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't need to. Then came the video. The room watched in silence as body cam footage played. A collapsing beam, a K9 lunging, a man pulled clear just before the crash. The timestamp glowed in the corner like a witness that couldn't be intimidated. Blake's attorney shifted. Relevance? Pattern, Mara said. Motive. Judge Price's pen stopped moving. Mara called the neighbor. The woman spoke carefully, nervously, but she spoke. Screams after training, storms, fear. Finally, Judge Price looked at Jack. Mr. Turner, she said, you may speak. Jack stood. He didn't dress it up. I found her tied, underwater during a flood warning. The knot was clean. The rope was new. I didn't know her name then. I just knew she was holding on for her puppy. Blake's attorney scoffed. Anecdote. Judge Price raised a hand. Enough. She leaned back. Bring the dog. The room stiffened as Luna entered on a loose lead, bandage still visible at her neck. She walked slowly, carefully, eyes scanning. When Blake cleared his throat, she froze. Her body curled inward. A low tremor ran through her legs. Mr. Blake, the judge said, call your dog. Blake stood. He smiled, forced and thin. Luna, he said, voice measured. Come. She didn't move. She lowered her head, ears flattened, eyes darting for escape. The silence thickened. Mr. Turner, Judge Price said. Jack didn't command. He didn't step forward. He knelt, palms open, gaze lowered. He waited. Luna took one step, then another. She crossed the room and pressed her forehead to his chest, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. Jack rested a hand on her shoulder. Light, respectful. Judge Price removed her glasses. I've seen enough, she said. Blake's attorney started to protest. The gavel cut him off. Emergency injunction granted, Judge Price ruled. Custody remains with veterinary care and Mr. Turner as temporary guardian. The matter is referred for criminal investigation. Mr. Blake, you are not to contact these animals. Blake stood too quickly. This is over, the judge said quietly. For today. Outside, the hallway felt brighter. Jack leaned against the wall, breath finally steady. Mara closed her folder. You did exactly what you needed to do. Jack looked down at Luna. She looked back, steady now. For the first time since the river, the line held. The courthouse doors closed behind them, with a sound that felt final, even if nothing truly was. Jack stepped into the afternoon light and stopped, blinking. The sky was clear now, washed clean by the storm, the Ohio air cool and bright in a way that made everything feel briefly possible. Luna stood beside him on the lead, her weight steady, her presence real. The puppy, Miles, rode in a carrier at Jack's feet, quiet for once, watching the world with solemn eyes. Mara Klein checked her phone, already moving. "The injunctions filed and served," she said. "Internal Affairs will open their case. Animal Control is looped in. Your temporary guardianship is recognized pending the criminal review." Jack nodded, absorbing it piece by piece. "And Blake?" Mara's mouth tightened. "He'll fight. People like him always do, but today mattered. Judges remember moments like that." She paused, then added, "If he pushes back, we're ready." Across the street, a black sedan idled longer than it needed to. Jack didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He felt the gaze on his back like a memory trying to pull him under. Instead, he focused on Luna's breathing. Slow, even, and the small, grounding weight of the lead in his hand. Frank joined them, hands in his jacket pockets. "Truck's around the corner," he said. "I'll get you home." Home. The word felt borrowed. Jack hadn't thought of his apartment that way in years. It was a place to sleep, not a place to land. But as they walked, Luna leaned subtly into his leg, as if testing whether the ground would stay where it was. At the truck, Frank opened the passenger door. Jack lifted Luna carefully. She hesitated, then jumped, awkward but determined, settling onto the seat with a soft huff. Miles chirped once from the carrier. Frank grinned. "Looks like she's claiming it." The drive back was quiet. Not the heavy silence of waiting rooms or courtrooms, but something gentler. Radio low. Sun flashing through bare branches. Jack watched the road and let his thoughts line up instead of collide. At a stoplight, Frank glanced over. "You okay?" Jack considered the question. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm here." Frank nodded. "That counts." They reached Jack's building as evening crept in. The bait shop below was still closed, its windows papered over, the sign faded. Jack unlocked the door and hesitated, suddenly aware of the narrow stairs, the thin walls, the lack of space. Luna solved it for him. She stepped inside first, nose working, tail low but wagging once, tentative. She paused, then lay down near the door, choosing a spot as if it had always been hers. Jack set Miles down and watched as the puppy toddled to her side, curling into her chest with a sigh that sounded like relief. Jack sank onto the couch, the room quiet but no longer empty. Mara called once more that night. "One more thing," she said. "You should consider pet insurance and liability coverage. With a K9 history, it'll help if questions come up." Jack smiled faintly. "I'll look into it." After the call, he sat in the dim light, listening to the building settle. Luna's breathing filled the space, steady and reassuring. The river was miles away now, but its echo lingered, not as threat, but as reminder. He thought about the line he'd held, about the moment he hadn't let go. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked and fell quiet again. Jack stood, filled a bowl with water, set it near Luna. She drank, slow and careful, then looked up at him. "You're safe," he said, not as a promise, but as a fact he intended to keep. The tide had turned, not because the system had suddenly become kind, but because truth, once anchored, was hard to drag back under. And Jack Turner, for the first time in a long while, wasn't bracing for the pull.